Welcome to the lesson on Clause 4 of the ISO 21001 standards. This lesson explains with examples the requirements to fulfill the Clause 4. Let's understand the context of an organization. Context of the organization, in particular in this context it is educational organization, is a social and community environment determined by external and internal factors or issues. Organizations include those that are autonomous and can be governed by framing policies on its own. It can be at the level of a university or a school. External issues which determine the environment are like legal, financial, social, regulatory, cultural, etc. Organization internal environment is determined by internal factors like the internal structures, governance, resource capabilities, culture, etc. The context of the organization also depends on the requirements of the interested parties. Clause 4.1 is understanding the organization and its context. What is the requirement in 4.1? The organization should determine its context by determining the internal and external issues that are relevant to its purpose, social responsibility, and strategic direction, as well as other issues that affect its ability to achieve its intended outcomes. Issues that form the context can be positive or negative factors. External context, as discussed in the earlier slide, include issues like technology and its changes, competition and the competitors, market situation including ease of liquidity, political climate, economic and environmental factors. These external issues can be local and immediate, regional, national, or international. Internal issues are those that are more in control by the organization. The values and culture need to be determined and documented to predict the success of any changes that is going to happen in the organization. The knowledge and performance are also internal issues, understanding of which will help properly manage the organization. The mission and vision provides the strategic direction of the organization and sets the tone of the organization. Here's an example with a quiz. It's given in the quiz, the dental school has a rich and long tradition. Pause the slide, scan the QR code and identify the internal and external issues of the school. Going to clause 4.2, it is on interested parties, understanding the needs and expectation. The 4.2 clause requirement is to determine the interested parties, list them out, and their relevant requirements. Who are the interested parties? They are people that can be affected by, or perceived to be affected by a decision or activity of the educational organization. They can include learners, other beneficiaries, staff of the organization. The needs, expectation, and requirements of the interested parties affect the organization's ability to consistently and sustainably provide services. Also, constantly monitor and review the list of interested parties and their requirements as a fulfillment of clause 4.2. Again, another quiz with an example. Pause here, scan for quiz 4.2. 4.3. The clause 4.3 is on scope of the EOMS. EOMS stands for Educational Organization Management System. Here the requirement is to determine the boundaries and applicability of the EOMS that forms its scope. The scope of EOMS should be available as a documented information. To determine the scope, the three most important things to consider are the context as in 4.1, requirements of the interested parties as in clause 4.2, and the products and services of the organization. This will help us determine the boundaries or the scope of the organization's functions and influence, and that is influenced and governed by the EOMS. All the requirements as per ISO 21001 should be applied and determined in an organization if they are applicable within the determined scope of the EOMS. So, determining the scope of EOMS will determine what requirements are applicable to be audited. Scope should also include the products and services provided by the educational organization. Any standards of ISO 21001 that is not within the scope of the EOMS should be suitably justified as to the reason for the exclusion. Pause here for another quiz on clause 4.3. The clause 4.4 has two subclauses and is on the EOMS, namely Educational Organization Management System. The requirement of 4.4.1 is to establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve an EOMS and its processes. The process in EOMS is a set of interrelated or interacting activities which transforms inputs to outputs. The various processes in a EOMS work in tandem to achieve the organization's objectives. Determining its role is very important. As part of 4.4.1, it is required to determine all the processes, their inputs and outputs, the sequence and the interaction among the processes, the criteria and methods to evaluate the performance of the processes, resources required to run the processes, responsibilities and authorities on these processes, risks and opportunities that affect these processes, and should constantly monitor these processes to improve. And all this should be available as a documentation also. The requirement of 4.4.2, the other clause of 4.4, is to maintain documentation on the operation of the processes. This will instill confidence among the interested parties and other stakeholders so that the processes are conducted as documented and planned. Thank you. Our next lesson will be on clause 5, that is leadership.